I'm Valentina Brennan, and 3 years ago I stood in a white dress surrounded by 200 guests while federal agents stormed through the doors of the most expensive venue in Charleston. My fiancé, the man I was about to marry, ordered the arrest of 7 people that day. 4 of them were my own family. The charges ranged from wire fraud to money laundering to conspiracy. The case had been building for 18 months, and I had no idea I was sleeping next to the agent who would dismantle everything I thought I knew about the people who raised me. Now those same people sit in a federal prison while I testify in court, wearing the engagement ring of the man who saved my life by destroying it first. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of the wedding started with magnolias. I remember that detail because the scent hit me the moment I stepped out of the car at the Ashmore estate. Heavy, sweet, almost drug-like in its intensity. The kind of southern spring morning where the humidity wraps around you like a second skin and the sun filters through ancient oak trees in shafts of gold. I wore a silk robe over my undergarments, my hair already pinned in loose curls that took 3 hours to perfect. My sister Claudia walked beside me holding the train of the robe off the gravel path like I was already royalty. Everything felt surreal. I kept waiting for the nervousness to hit, the cold feet, the panic that every bride supposedly experiences. But all I felt was this calm, floating sensation. Like I was watching my own life from somewhere above. Dominic had texted me that morning. Just 3 words. Today we start. I smiled at my phone, thinking he meant our marriage, our future, the life we'd been planning since he proposed on a sailboat in the harbor 2 years prior. I had no idea he meant something else entirely. The bridal suite at Ashmore was all cream walls and vintage mirrors, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the garden where white chairs sat in perfect rows. My mother Diane arrived with the dress, a custom gown that cost more than my first car. She had insisted on paying for it. Insisted on this entire wedding actually, which should have been my first clue. My mother never gave anything without strings attached. But I was too caught up in the fantasy to notice the weight of those strings pulling tighter. She hung the dress on the hook by the window and turned to me with that smile she reserved for company. The one that never reached her eyes. "You look beautiful already," she said. "Dominic is a lucky man." I thanked her, and she kissed my forehead, her perfume sharp and chemical. Then she left to check on the flowers, to micromanage the caterers, to control every detail the way she'd controlled every detail of my entire life up until the moment I moved out at 23. Claudia helped me into the dress. My sister had always been careful with her hands, delicate in a way that seemed practiced. She buttoned each tiny pearl along my spine without speaking, her breath shallow and quick. I asked her if she was okay, and she said she was fine, just emotional. Looking back now, I realized she wasn't emotional. She was terrified. She knew what was coming. She had to have known. But she said nothing, and I stepped into the most expensive lie I'd ever worn. My father Kenneth appeared in the doorway just as I finished pinning the veil. He wore a gray suit that looked newly tailored, his silver hair combed back in that old money style he perfected despite growing up in a trailer park in Alabama. He had this way of rewriting his own history, of speaking about his childhood as if it had been full of country clubs and debutante balls. I used to think it was charming, the way he reinvented himself. Now I know it was just practice for bigger deceptions. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Regret, maybe. Or fear. It was gone before I could name it. "You ready, sweetheart?" he asked. I nodded, taking his arm, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders. We walked down the corridor toward the garden, and I could hear the string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. The kind of music that exists only to fill space. Dominic stood at the altar in a navy suit, his hands clasped in front of him. He was tall, dark-haired, with this quiet intensity that had drawn me to him the first time we met at a fundraiser for the Charleston Harbor Project. He worked in security consulting, he'd told me. Corporate risk assessment. Boring stuff, he'd said with that half-smile that made my stomach flip. I believed him because I wanted to. Because he seemed stable and honest and nothing like the chaos I'd grown up in, even if I didn't fully understand that chaos yet. His best man Lucas stood beside him, and I noticed two other men in suits near the back row. They looked stiff, formal, out of place among the garden party crowd. I assumed they were Dominic's colleagues from work. I didn't recognize them, but Dominic had a life before me that I'd never fully asked about. He was private in a way I mistook for mysterious rather than strategic. The ceremony started. I floated down the aisle on my father's arm while 200 people turned to watch. My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. My brother Trevor stood in the second row with his wife, his face blank in that way he'd mastered, the expression of someone who'd learned early how to hide. Claudia took her place as maid of honor, her hands shaking as she held my bouquet of white peonies. The officiant began the traditional words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I focused on Dominic's face, on the way he was looking at me with something that seemed like sorrow. I thought it was just the weight of the moment, the magnitude of promising forever. I reached for his hand when the officiant prompted us, and his fingers were ice cold despite the warmth of the afternoon. Then it happened. Just as the officiant asked if anyone had reason these two should not be wed, the garden doors burst open. Not the gentle opening of a late guest trying to sneak in unnoticed. This was forceful, deliberate, the sound of wood slamming against stone. 6 people in FBI windbreakers flooded into the garden, followed by uniformed officers. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Someone in the crowd screamed. Dominic didn't move. He stood perfectly still, watching the agents approach, and I realized with a sick lurch in my stomach that he'd been expecting this. One of the agents, a woman with her hair pulled back severely, walked straight up to us. She didn't look at me. She looked at Dominic and gave a single nod. "Agent Ashford," she said. "We're ready." The world tilted. Agent Ashford. Not Dominic Ashford, security consultant. Agent Ashford. FBI. The man I was about to marry was FBI, and he'd never told me. The woman turned to the crowd, her voice carrying across the garden with practiced authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Special Agent Delgado with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have warrants for the arrest of several individuals present at this event. Please remain calm and stay in your seats." I looked at Dominic, my hand still in his, my veil lifting slightly in the breeze. "What is this?" I whispered. His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, Val," he said quietly. But this was the only way. The agents moved through the crowd with precision. They went directly to my mother first. "Diane Brennan, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and money laundering." My mother's face went white, then red. She started to speak, to protest, but they were already reading her rights, already cuffing her hands behind her back. Her handkerchief fell to the grass. My father was next. Kenneth Brennan, same charges, plus tax evasion. He didn't fight. He just closed his eyes like he'd been waiting for this moment for years. Maybe he had been. Trevor tried to run, actually pushed past his wife and headed for the side gate, but 2 agents caught him before he made it 10 feet. Claudia collapsed onto a chair, her face in her hands, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. I stood frozen at the altar in my custom gown, watching my family disintegrate in real time. Guests were crying, some were trying to leave, others pulled out their phones to record. The most expensive wedding Charleston had seen in a decade had become a crime scene, complete with yellow tape that agents were already stringing around the perimeter. Dominic finally let go of my hand. He stepped away from me, and I saw him transform into someone else entirely. His posture changed, his expression hardened. He was no longer the man who'd held me while I cried about work stress, who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd promised me forever just moments ago. He was Agent Ashford, and he'd been playing a role for 2 years. "Val," he said, and his voice was different now. Clipped, professional. "I need you to come with me. We have questions." "Questions about what?" I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange, distant. "About your family's financial activities." About Brennan Holdings. About the shell companies and offshore accounts. We've been investigating them for 18 months. I didn't know if you were involved, but I had to be sure. The words landed like physical blows. 18 months. He'd known for 18 months that my family was under investigation, and he'd said nothing. He'd proposed to me while building a case against them. He'd planned a wedding that he knew would end exactly like this. I'm not involved in anything, I said, and I heard the tremor in my voice. I don't even know what Brennan Holdings does. My father always said it was commercial real estate. Dominic's expression softened for just a second. I know, he said. I know you're not involved, Val. That's why you're not in cuffs. But I need you to cooperate. I need you to tell us everything you know. Everything I know, I repeated dumbly. I don't know anything. I was a middle school art teacher. I painted on weekends and coached youth soccer. My family's business was a black box I'd never been invited to open. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They'd kept me separate, I realized now. Deliberately separate. Not because they loved me too much to involve me, but because I was useful as the innocent one. The daughter with clean hands who could smile for cameras at charity events and make the Brennan name look legitimate. Agent Delgado approached us. Sir, she said to Dominic, we need to clear the venue. He nodded, then looked back at me. Val, I need you to go with Agent Delgado. She'll take you somewhere quiet where we can talk. You're not under arrest. You're a witness. But I need you to trust me right now. Trust you? The words came out sharp, bitter. You've been lying to me for 2 years. You proposed to me while investigating my family. You planned our wedding as cover for a federal raid. And you want me to trust you? Something flashed across his face. Pain, maybe. Or guilt. I never lied about loving you, he said quietly. Everything else was complicated, but that was real. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip off the veil and the dress and run until my lungs gave out. Instead, I just stood there while my entire life crumbled into dust around me, while agents photographed the scene and guests whispered and my mother shouted about lawyers from the back of a federal vehicle. Agent Delgado touched my elbow gently. Come on, honey, she said, her voice surprisingly kind. Let's get you out of this dress and somewhere you can breathe. I let her lead me back to the bridal suite, my train dragging through the grass, picking up dirt and crushed petals. Behind me, I heard Dominic giving orders to his team, his voice steady and sure. The voice of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. In the bridal suite, Agent Delgado helped me out of the gown. She didn't rush me, didn't push. She just stood there while I fumbled with the tiny pearl buttons, while I finally started crying, while I asked questions she couldn't or wouldn't answer. She handed me jeans and a t-shirt from my overnight bag, clothes I'd packed for the honeymoon that would never happen. The honeymoon to Santorini that had been a lie, that had probably been a convenient excuse for Dominic to be unavailable while his team executed warrants. I changed mechanically, removing each piece of bridal fantasy and replacing it with reality. When I was dressed, Agent Delgado led me out through a side entrance, away from the cameras and the chaos. We drove in silence to the Charleston Federal Building, a glass and concrete structure downtown that I'd passed 1,000 times without ever imagining I'd be inside. They put me in an interview room. Not a cell, she emphasized. Just a room where we could talk privately. It had a table, 3 chairs, a mirror that was obviously two-way glass. I sat down and stared at my hands, at the engagement ring that now felt like evidence. A 4-carat diamond that Dominic had saved for months to buy, or so he'd said. Maybe the FBI had paid for it. Maybe it was a prop in an elaborate sting operation. Maybe nothing in the last 2 years had been real. Dominic entered the room 20 minutes later. He'd removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves. He looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. He sat across from me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. I need you to tell me what you know about Brennan Holdings, he finally said. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. I told you. Nothing. I know nothing. My father called it commercial real estate. He said they owned properties in Atlanta, Charlotte, Jacksonville. He never talked about work at home. My mother made sure of that. Dominic pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were bank statements, wire transfer records, photographs of buildings I'd never seen. Brennan Holdings is a front, he said. Your father used it to launder money for a network of construction fraud schemes across the Southeast. They'd win government contracts, inflate costs, pocket the difference, and move the money through shell companies. Your mother managed the books. Trevor handled logistics. Claudia ran interference with local officials. And me? I asked. What was my role? You didn't have one, he said. That's what made you perfect. You were the proof that the Brennans were a normal, successful family. You taught kids and painted landscapes and showed up to charity events with a genuine smile. You made them look legitimate. So I was a prop. You were the only real thing in a house full of lies, he said quietly. That's why I couldn't tell you. If you'd known, if you'd reacted differently, they would have suspected. And we needed them to feel safe long enough to gather everything we needed for trial. You proposed to me for your investigation, I said flatly. He shook his head. I proposed to you because I love you. The investigation complicated everything, but it didn't create my feelings. I've wanted to tell you 1,000 times. I hated every second of deceiving you. But you did it anyway. Yes, he said. I did. Because these people hurt hundreds of families, Val. They stole millions in taxpayer money. They bribed officials and falsified documents and destroyed evidence. And they were good at it. So good that we needed every advantage, including the fact that you trusted me enough to bring me into family events where I could observe, where I could gather intelligence. I felt sick. All those dinners at my parents' house. All those holiday gatherings where Dominic had been charming and polite and helpful. He'd been working. Building a case. Documenting conversations. And I'd been oblivious, happy that my family finally accepted someone I loved. How long have you actually been FBI? I asked. 7 years, he said. I worked undercover in Atlanta before this. Corporate corruption cases, mostly. When we got the tip about Brennan Holdings, I volunteered for the assignment. That fundraiser where we met wasn't an accident. I was there specifically to meet you. Our entire relationship is a lie. No, he said firmly. How we met was engineered. Everything after that was real. My feelings, our connection, the life we built together, that was all real, Val. I never faked loving you. But you faked everything else, I said. Your job, your background, your intentions. You let me plan a wedding you knew would never happen. You let me send invitations and pick flowers and write vows. You watched me fall more in love with you while you were gathering evidence to destroy my family. He ran a hand through his hair, and I saw the exhaustion in every line of his face. I know, he said. I know how this looks. I know what I've taken from you. But Val, they were using you. Your father put the house in your name to shield assets. Your mother named you as a beneficiary on accounts you didn't know existed. They were setting you up to take the fall if anything went wrong. What? The room tilted again. He pulled out more documents. Look. This property in Mount Pleasant. It's in your name. So is this account at First Southern Bank. Your signature is on file, but I'm betting you never signed anything. Your father forged your signature on dozens of documents over the past 5 years. If we hadn't moved when we did, if they'd gotten spooked and tried to run, you would have been left holding all the evidence. You would have gone to prison for their crimes. I stared at the papers, at my name typed on line after line, at signatures that looked like mine but weren't quite right. My father had been planning my betrayal for years. He'd been setting up his own daughter as a scapegoat while smiling at Sunday dinners and bragging about my teaching awards. They never loved you the way you deserved, Dominic said quietly. They loved what you could do for them. The legitimacy you provided, the cover you gave them. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry it had to be your wedding day. But Val, I saved you. You just can't see it yet. I looked at him across the table, at this man I thought I knew, who'd shared my bed and my secrets and my future. Who'd held me through panic attacks and celebrated my small victories and promised me forever with what seemed like his whole heart. And maybe it had been his whole heart. Maybe he'd been torn apart by the same lies that were tearing me apart now. I need time, I finally said. I need to process this. All of this. He nodded. You can stay at my place tonight. Or I can get you a hotel. Whatever you need. Agent Delgado will make sure you have everything. I don't want to stay at your place, I said. I don't even know whose place it is. Who you actually are. Fair enough, he said. He stood up, walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Val, I meant my vows. Every word I wrote for today. I still mean them. Then he left, and I sat alone in the interview room wearing jeans and a t-shirt that smelled like wedding perfume, surrounded by evidence of my family's crimes and my own stupidity. Outside, the sun was setting over Charleston. Somewhere, my family was being processed into the federal system. Somewhere, 200 wedding guests were telling the story of the most dramatic ceremony they'd ever witnessed. And somewhere inside me, beneath the shock and anger and grief, a small voice whispered that maybe Dominic was right. Maybe he had saved me. Maybe the life I thought I wanted was just another pretty lie, and the only person who'd ever told me the truth was the man who'd lied about everything else. Agent Delgado drove me to the Maritime Inn, a boutique hotel near the harbor. She helped me check in under a false name, gave me her card, told me to call if I needed anything. I rode the elevator to the 4th floor and let myself into a room that smelled like vanilla and new carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the engagement ring, and finally let myself fall apart. I cried for the wedding that never happened. For the family that never existed. For the man I loved who was and wasn't the person I thought he was. I cried until my throat burned and my eyes swelled and the sun disappeared completely beyond the harbor. Then I lay down in the dark and tried to remember a single moment from my childhood that hadn't been a performance, a single truth my parents had ever told me that didn't serve their own purposes. I couldn't find one. Not one real thing in 30 years except the man who'd deceived me to save me, and the terrifying possibility that he loved me anyway. The morning after arrived with brutal clarity. I woke up in the hotel room disoriented, my face swollen from crying, still wearing the clothes Agent Delgado had given me. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Then it all crashed back. The wedding. The arrests. Dominic's face when he said Agent Ashford. The way my mother looked in handcuffs. I sat up and reached for my phone, which had died sometime during the night. When I plugged it in and powered it on, it exploded with notifications. 63 missed calls. Over 200 text messages. Dozens of voicemails. I scrolled through them with shaking hands. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters who'd gotten my contact information from the wedding registry or guest list. Some were from friends asking if I was okay, if the news reports were real, if I needed anything. 3 were from my mother's sister, Aunt Margot, each one more frantic than the last. But there was one message that made me stop scrolling. It came from a number saved simply as C, sent at 2:47 in the morning. I'm sorry you had to see it that way. I wanted to tell you so many times. Please don't hate me. I'm still your sister even if everything else was fake. Claudia. My sister who'd helped me into my wedding dress, who'd held my bouquet, who'd sobbed in a garden chair while agents arrested our parents. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decode what it meant. I'm still your sister even if everything else was fake. What did she know? How much had she been involved? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I got up and moved to the window. The harbor stretched out below, boats bobbing gently in their slips, people jogging along the waterfront path like the world hadn't ended yesterday. I felt disconnected from all of it, like I was watching through thick glass. A knock on the door made me jump. I checked the peephole and saw Agent Delgado standing in the hallway holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag. I opened the door slowly. "Morning," she said, her voice gentle. "Thought you might need caffeine and something to eat. I haven't seen you consume anything since yesterday afternoon." I let her in. She set the coffee and bag on the small table by the window and gestured for me to sit. I did, mechanically, and she pushed one of the cups toward me. It was still hot, steam rising from the lid. The bag contained a croissant and some kind of breakfast sandwich. "You need to eat," she said. "I know everything feels impossible right now, but your body still needs fuel." I picked up the coffee and sipped it. It was exactly how I liked it, which meant either she'd asked Dominic or she'd done her homework on me too. The thought made my stomach turn, but I drank it anyway because she was right. I needed something. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I feel like I'm underwater. Like none of this is real." "It's real," she said quietly. "And I know that doesn't help. But Val, I want you to understand something. What happened yesterday, it wasn't about hurting you. It was about stopping your family before they caused more damage." I looked at her. She had kind eyes, I noticed. Tired, but kind. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About my family. About Dominic's assignment. I've been his partner for 4 years," she said. "I knew about the Brennan investigation from the beginning. I was there when he first proposed going undercover to get close to you. So you knew he was lying to me the whole time." "I knew he was doing his job," she corrected gently. "But Val, I also watched him fall in love with you. That wasn't part of the assignment. That complicated everything. There were nights he'd call me questioning whether he could go through with it, whether he should pull out of the operation. He was torn apart by this. But he didn't pull out," I said flatly. "He kept lying. Because people were being hurt," she said. "Your father's schemes weren't victimless. Every dollar he stole was supposed to go to schools, hospitals, infrastructure projects. Families lost their homes because of cost overruns he engineered. Small businesses went bankrupt. And he kept doing it because he was good at it and because no one could touch him. Until Dominic touched him by using me," I said. Agent Delgado leaned forward. "Your family was using you long before Dominic met you. They put your name on documents without your knowledge. They used your teaching career and your reputation to make themselves look legitimate. You were a tool to them. Dominic saw you as a person. That's the difference." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I opened the paper bag and pulled out the croissant. It was flaky and buttery and tasted like absolutely nothing. I ate it anyway while Agent Delgado watched me with that careful expression people use when they're worried someone might shatter. "I need to see Claudia," I said suddenly. Agent Delgado's expression shifted, became more guarded. "Why?" "Because she texted me. Because she said everything else was fake, which means she knew something. I need to understand what she knew and when she knew it." "She's being held at the county detention center pending arraignment," Agent Delgado said. "But I can arrange a visit if you really want to see her. It might help us too, actually. She might talk to you." "Is that why you're being nice to me?" I asked. "Because you want me to get information from my sister?" "I'm being nice to you because you're a victim in this situation," she said firmly. "But yes, if she tells you something useful, we'd want to know. That doesn't make my concern for you any less genuine." I finished the croissant and washed it down with more coffee. "Fine," I said. "Set it up. I want to see her today." Agent Delgado made a call. 20 minutes later, we were in her car heading to the detention center. She'd given me a baseball cap and sunglasses to avoid reporters, though I doubted they'd help much. My face had probably been plastered across every news site in the region by now. Runaway bride at FBI raid. Art teacher's family exposed as fraud ring. I could write the headlines myself. The detention center was a squat concrete building on the outskirts of Charleston, surrounded by chain-link fencing and security cameras. Agent Delgado walked me through intake, showed her credentials, got me cleared for a visitor meeting. They took my phone and my bag and led me to a small room with a table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs that looked like they'd been salvaged from an elementary school. Claudia entered 5 minutes later, escorted by a guard. She wore an orange jumpsuit that washed out her complexion, and her hair, always so carefully styled, hung limp around her face. When she saw me, she burst into tears immediately. "Val," she said, reaching across the table. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I didn't take her hand. I just stared at her, waiting. The guard stepped back but stayed in the room, watching us both. "Tell me what you knew," I said. My voice came out colder than I intended, but I didn't soften it. "Tell me everything." Claudia wiped her face with her sleeve. "I didn't know it would happen at your wedding," she said. "I swear I didn't know that. Daddy told us there was an investigation, that we needed to be careful, but he said it would blow over. He said he had it handled." "When did he tell you this?" "6 months ago," she said. "Maybe longer. He called a family meeting. Just him and Mom and Trevor and me. You weren't invited because he said you didn't need to worry about business stuff. He showed us some documents, some subpoenas. He said the FBI was fishing, that they had nothing solid, that we just needed to stick to the story." "And what was the story?" "That everything was legitimate," she said. "That Brennan Holdings was exactly what we said it was. That we'd cooperated with every audit, that our books were clean. He made us practice answering questions, made us rehearse what we'd say if anyone asked about specific transactions." "But you knew it was a lie," I said. "You knew what they were really doing." Claudia looked down at her hands. "I knew some of it," she admitted. "I knew Daddy was moving money around in ways that didn't make sense. I knew Mom was keeping 2 sets of books. But I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know about the bribes or the kickbacks or the shell companies. I just knew we were supposed to keep quiet and look respectable." "And you did," I said. "You kept quiet while they used me as a shield. While they put my name on documents I never signed." Her face crumpled. "I didn't know about that either," she said. "I swear, Val. If I'd known Daddy was forging your signature, I would have told you. You have to believe me." "Why should I believe you?" I asked. "You've been lying to me for months. Years, maybe. Every time we had dinner together, every time you called to chat about your wedding plans, you were lying." "I wasn't lying about everything," she said desperately. "I love you. You're my sister. That was never fake." "But you didn't protect me," I said. "When you knew something was wrong, when you knew I was being used, you said nothing. You just went along with it because it was easier than standing up to them." Claudia started crying again, harder this time. "You don't understand what it's like," she said. "You got out. You moved away, built your own life. You were always the strong one. I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. I stayed because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't do what they wanted. So you sacrificed me instead," I said. She didn't answer. She just sat there crying while I watched, feeling nothing. The sister I'd grown up with, who'd shared a room with me until I was 12, who'd taught me how to braid hair and helped me through my first heartbreak, she was a stranger now. Or maybe she'd always been a stranger and I'd just been too naive to notice. The guard shifted, checking her watch. "Time's almost up," she said. "Wait," Claudia said, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. "There's something else you need to know. Something I can tell you that might help." I waited. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There's a safe deposit box," she said. At First Southern Bank downtown. It's under your name, but I have a key. Daddy put it there last year. He said it was insurance, that if anything ever happened, you'd be taken care of. But Val, I think there are documents in there. Things that prove what he was doing. Things that might help the FBI. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What's in it for you? Maybe I get a lighter sentence if I cooperate, she said. Maybe I'm just tired of lying. Or maybe I actually do love you, even though I've done a terrible job of showing it. I stood up. The guard moved toward the door, ready to escort Claudia back. I looked at my sister one more time, trying to find something of the girl I'd grown up with, some piece of her that was still real. I couldn't find it. I'll tell them about the box, I said. But Claudia, I need you to understand something. You made a choice. You chose them over me, chose silence over truth. I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't know if I even want to try. I understand, she whispered. And Val, for what it's worth, your wedding would have been beautiful. You looked so happy in that dress. I wish things had been different. So do I said. Then I walked out. Agent Delgado was waiting in the hallway. She didn't ask what happened. She just fell into step beside me as we walked back through security, collected my things, and headed to the car. Once we were inside, she turned to me. Well? There's a safe deposit box at First Southern Bank, I said. Under my name. Claudia thinks there are documents in it that might help your case. Agent Delgado's eyes sharpened. Does she have access to it? She has a key, I said. But I'm named on the account, so I should be able to access it too. She pulled out her phone and made a call, speaking rapidly to whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, she started the car. We're going to the bank now, she said. Dominic's meeting us there. My stomach twisted at his name, but I nodded. 15 minutes later, we were parked outside First Southern Bank, a historic building in the financial district with columns and brass fixtures that screamed old money. Agent Delgado led me inside while speaking quietly into her phone. 2 other agents I didn't recognize entered through a side door, trying to look casual but failing. Dominic was already there, standing near the vault entrance in a dark suit. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe. Or guilt. He approached carefully, like I might bolt. Val, he said quietly. Thank you for doing this. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because I want to understand what they did to me. Fair enough, he said. He turned to the bank manager, an older man with silver hair and nervous hands, and showed his credentials. We need access to box 317, he said. Ms. Brennan is authorized on the account. The manager nodded quickly and led us to the vault, a climate-controlled room lined with brass boxes. He used his key along with mine, the one Agent Delgado had retrieved from evidence after Claudia's arrest, and pulled out a long metal box. He set it on a table in a private viewing room and stepped back. Dominic looked at me. Do you want to open it, or should I? I'll do it, I said. I lifted the lid with shaking hands. Inside were stacks of documents. Bank statements, wire transfer records, spreadsheets with highlighted sections. There were also flash drives, 6 of them, labeled with dates going back 5 years. And at the very bottom, folded carefully, was a handwritten letter on my father's personal stationery. I picked up the letter and unfolded it. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely read the words, but I forced myself to focus. Valentina, it began. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I want you to know that everything I did was to provide for our family, to give you and your siblings opportunities one never had. I may have bent some rules, but I never meant to hurt anyone. These documents will explain everything. Use them wisely. Protect yourself first. I love you. Dad. I read it twice, then handed it to Dominic without saying anything. He scanned it quickly, his jaw tightening. Then he turned to the documents, flipping through them with practiced efficiency. Agent Delgado joined him, and I watched as they found exactly what they were looking for. Evidence. Proof. Ammunition for trial. This is comprehensive, Agent Delgado said quietly. Wire fraud, tax evasion, bribery of public officials. It's all here. Documented by his own hand. Why would he keep this? I asked. Why would he create evidence against himself? Insurance, Dominic said. If he ever got caught, he could use it to negotiate. Or he could pin it on someone else. Maybe even you, if it came down to it. The words hit me like a punch. My father had created a paper trail that could destroy him, and he'd put it in my name. Not to protect me. To sacrifice me if necessary. The realization was so painful I had to sit down. Dominic crouched in front of me, his eyes level with mine. Val, I know this is devastating. I know it feels like everyone you trusted has betrayed you. But you're not alone in this. You have people who want to help you. People like you? I asked bitterly. People who lie for a living? People like me who saved you from going to prison for crimes you didn't commit, he said firmly. If we hadn't moved when we did, if your father had disappeared or transferred everything to offshore accounts, you would have been left holding this box and all the legal liability that came with it. You would have been arrested. You would have faced decades in federal prison. I prevented that. By lying to me for 2 years, I said. By loving you and doing my job at the same time, he said. I'm not saying it was perfect. I'm not saying I didn't hurt you. But Val, I saved your life. Even if you hate me for it, that's still true. I looked at him, at this man who'd proposed to me while wearing a wire, who'd kissed me goodnight while building a case against my family, who'd planned our future while knowing it would implode spectacularly. And the terrible thing was, I could see the truth in his eyes. He had saved me. He'd destroyed my life to save it. I need time, I said again. It was becoming my default response. Time to process, time to heal, time to figure out who I was without the family that had shaped me or the man who'd reshaped me through deception. I understand, he said. But Val, when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. I meant what I said at the altar. I still mean it. He stood up and returned to the documents, giving me space. I sat in that viewing room surrounded by evidence of my father's crimes, my mother's complicity, my siblings' cowardice. And I thought about Dominic's words. You have people who want to help you. The question was whether I could trust any of them ever again. 3 weeks passed in a strange blur of depositions and lawyer meetings and nights spent in hotel rooms that all looked identical. I'd moved from the Maritime into a furnished apartment Agent Delgado helped me find, a second-floor unit in a converted warehouse near the college district. It had exposed brick and large windows and absolutely no connection to my old life, which made it perfect. I stopped answering my phone except for calls from my attorney, a sharp woman named Natalie Voss who specialized in victims of financial crimes. She'd taken my case pro bono after reading about the wedding raid in the papers. The media attention was relentless at first. Reporters camped outside the federal building, outside the apartment, outside the coffee shop where I'd gone exactly once before realizing I couldn't show my face in public without cameras following. Charleston bride caught in FBI sting. Teacher's family exposed as fraud network. The headlines wrote themselves, and I became a curiosity, a scandal, a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people. My principal at Magnolia Middle School called to offer support but also to suggest I take an extended leave of absence. The optics weren't good, she explained carefully. Parents were concerned. The district needed to protect its reputation. I understood what she meant. I was toxic now, guilty by association even though I'd done nothing wrong. I submitted my resignation the next day. Teaching had been the one part of my life that felt pure, untainted by my family's corruption, and now even that was gone. I spent most of my time alone. Agent Delgado checked in daily, usually with food or coffee, always with the same gentle concern. Dominic stayed away, which I'd requested through Natalie. I wasn't ready to see him, wasn't ready to sort through the tangled mess of anger and betrayal and the stubborn feeling that maybe he'd done exactly what he'd said, saved me by destroying everything I thought I knew. My old friends reached out tentatively at first, then less frequently when I didn't respond. I couldn't explain what I was going through. How could I tell them that my entire identity had been built on a foundation of lies? That the family who'd raised me had been systematically using me as camouflage for federal crimes? That the man I'd almost married had been investigating them the whole time we were falling in love? It was too complicated, too painful, too surreal. Instead, I started painting again. Not the pleasant landscapes I used to make for craft fairs and gallery shows, but something darker, more visceral. I bought supplies from an art store 3 neighborhoods over where no one recognized me, and I turned the apartment's spare room into a makeshift studio. I painted late into the night, working out grief and rage on canvas, creating images I didn't fully understand but that felt necessary, urgent, like something demanding to be released. One painting showed a wedding dress hanging empty, surrounded by shadows that could have been people or ghosts. Another depicted hands reaching up from beneath dark water, grasping at nothing. A third was just color and texture, violent reds and blacks that looked like wound, like something trying to heal but not knowing how. I didn't show these to anyone. They were mine, evidence of survival, proof that I could still create even when everything else had been taken away. Natalie called on a Thursday morning to tell me the grand jury had returned indictments. Kenneth Brennan, Diane Brennan, Trevor Brennan, and Claudia Brennan were all formally charged with wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. My father faced additional charges of bribing public officials and falsifying government documents. The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months. And me? I asked. What happens to me? You're listed as a witness for the prosecution, Natalie said. Dominic's team wants you to testify about what you knew, what you didn't know, how your family used your identity without your knowledge. It'll be difficult, but it's also your chance to tell your side of the story publicly. Do I have to? I asked. Can't they just use the documents from the safe deposit box? The documents are evidence, but the jury needs to see you, she said gently. They need to understand that you were a victim here, not a co-conspirator. Your testimony will make that clear. And Val, it'll also give you some power back. Right now, you're just reacting to what everyone else has done. Testifying means you get to speak, to be heard, to take control of the narrative. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. Taking control of the narrative. For 30 years, other people had controlled my narrative. My parents decided who I was supposed to be, their respectable daughter, their proof of legitimacy. My siblings decided I was naive enough to manipulate. Dominic decided I was worth saving even if it meant lying to me. And now the media decided I was either a villain or a victim depending on which version of the story sold more papers. Maybe it was time I decided for myself. I called Agent Delgado and asked if she could arrange a meeting with Dominic. She sounded surprised but said she'd set it up. 2 days later, I found myself back at the federal building, sitting in a conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. Dominic entered carrying a folder, dressed in the same kind of suit he'd worn to our wedding that wasn't. He looked tired, older somehow, like the past month had aged him. Val, he said, sitting down across from me. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I need to understand something, I said without preamble. I need to understand exactly when you started lying to me and when you stopped. He set the folder on the table and folded his hands. The assignment began 18 months before I met you, he said. We'd been investigating Brennan Holdings for 6 months when I was brought onto the team. The initial approach, meeting you at the fundraiser, that was engineered. We knew you'd be there because your mother was on the planning committee. So that part was fake, I said. That part was strategic, he corrected. But Val, the moment we started talking, the moment you told me about your students and showed me pictures of their art projects on your phone, something shifted. You weren't what I expected. I expected someone polished, rehearsed, performing for an audience. Instead, you were genuine. Real. Yourself in a way your family never was. That doesn't make the lie better, I said. I know, he said quietly. But I need you to understand that everything after that first conversation was complicated. I was supposed to get close to you to access your family. That was my job. But I also started caring about you, genuinely caring, and that made everything harder. When did you propose? I asked. Was that part of the operation? His expression shifted, became pained. The proposal was mine, he said. My decision, made against the advice of my supervisor and Agent Delgado. They told me I was in too deep, that I was compromising the investigation. I did it anyway because I loved you and I wanted a future with you, even though I knew it might not be possible. But you knew the wedding would never happen, I said. I hoped we could get through the investigation first, he said. I hoped I could tell you the truth before it came to that. But your father accelerated his activities. We intercepted communications indicating he might be planning to move assets offshore, which meant we had to act fast. The wedding became the logical time because we knew your whole family would be in one place, off guard, celebrating. So you used the happiest day of my life as bait, I said flatly. I used the access your family's false sense of security gave us to execute a warrant that had been months in the making, he said. And Val, I hated every second of it. I hated standing at that altar knowing what was about to happen. I hated watching your face when the agents came through those doors. I hated that I'd put you in that position. But I also knew that if I didn't, your father was going to disappear with evidence and money, and you were going to be left holding documents with your forged signature, facing federal charges for crimes you didn't commit. How long have you known about the forged signatures? I asked. 4 months, he said. We found samples during a subpoenaed audit. That's when I knew we couldn't wait any longer. You were in immediate legal danger, whether you knew it or not. And you didn't think to warn me? If I'd warned you, you would have confronted your father, he said. You would have asked questions, changed your behavior. He would have known something was wrong, and he would have run. We would have lost our chance to arrest him, and you would have still been on the hook for those documents. The only way to protect you was to keep you in the dark until we had everything we needed to prosecute. I stared at him across the table, this man who'd held me while I slept, who'd laughed at my terrible puns, who'd promised me forever with his fingers crossed behind his back. Except maybe they hadn't been crossed. Maybe he'd meant it. Maybe both things could be true at once, that he'd loved me and used me, saved me and destroyed me. Natalie says I need to testify, I said, changing the subject. She says it'll help establish that I wasn't involved. It will, he said. And Val, I'll be there. I'll be testifying too, about the investigation, about what we found. If you want, I can coordinate with you beforehand so you know what to expect. I don't want special treatment, I said. I just want the truth to come out. All of it. He nodded slowly. Then he opened the folder he'd brought and slid a document across to me. This is my full report on the investigation, he said. Everything we found, every interaction I had with your family, every piece of evidence we gathered. Natalie has a copy too, but I wanted you to see it directly from me. No filters, no lawyers softening the blow. Just the truth. I picked up the report. It was over 200 pages, dense with technical language and case numbers and photographs of documents. I flipped through it slowly, seeing my father's name over and over, my mother's initials on spreadsheets, Trevor's signature on false invoices. And there, in a section labeled Confidential Informant Observations, I saw my own name. Valentina Brennan, it read, appears to have no knowledge of family business operations. Subject maintains separate employment as middle school art teacher. Subject does not attend business meetings or discuss financial matters with family members. Assessment, uninvolved but valuable for access and legitimacy. I was a prop, I said aloud, reading the words. A valuable prop. You were a person they exploited, Dominic said firmly. And you deserved better than that. You deserved a family that loved you for who you were, not what you could provide them. You deserved honesty. And I know I didn't give you that either, but Val, everything I felt for you was real. That's the one thing in this entire mess that was completely, uncomplicatedly real. How am I supposed to believe that? I asked, and I heard my voice crack. How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been playing a role this whole time? Because I'm not playing a role anymore, he said. The investigation is over. The warrants are executed. I don't have to lie anymore, and I'm choosing not to. I'm choosing to sit here and let you read every word I wrote about you, even the parts that make me look calculating and cold. I'm choosing to answer your questions honestly even when it makes me look terrible. Because I want you to see me, really see me, the same way I saw you from the beginning. I closed the folder. I need to take this home and read it, I said. All of it. And then I need to decide if I can be in the same courtroom as you without wanting to scream. That's fair, he said. He stood up, and I noticed his hand trembling slightly as he picked up his coffee cup. Before you go, though, there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have said at the hotel that first night. What? I asked. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry for lying to you, for using your trust, for turning your wedding into a crime scene. I'm sorry for every morning I woke up next to you knowing I was deceiving you. I'm sorry for falling in love with you while wearing a wire. I'm sorry for all of it, even though I'd do it again because it was the only way to save you. I'm sorry, and I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to hear it. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing the exhaustion in his face, the genuine regret in his eyes. He meant it. That was the worst part. He genuinely meant every word, which made it impossible to hate him cleanly, to write him off as just another person who'd used me. Noted, I said finally. Then I picked up the folder and walked out. The next 6 weeks were a marathon of preparation. Natalie drilled me on testimony, teaching me how to answer questions clearly without volunteering extra information. We practiced staying calm under cross-examination, practiced maintaining eye contact, practiced telling my story in a way that was both truthful and strategic. She showed me videos of other witnesses, pointed out what worked and what didn't, helped me understand that a courtroom was a performance space where truth had to be communicated effectively to be believed. I read Dominic's report cover to cover 3 times. It was methodical, detailed, occasionally damning in its assessment of my family's criminal sophistication. My father had been running schemes for over 15 years, moving money through increasingly complex networks of shell companies and offshore accounts. My mother had been his accountant and enforcer, the one who maintained the facade of legitimacy while hiding money in plain sight. Trevor handled logistics, bribing inspectors and falsifying permits. Claudia managed public relations, attending charity events and society functions to make the Brennan name synonymous with respectability. And me? I was the unknowing mascot, the daughter whose clean record and genuine career made investigators think twice about whether the family could really be as corrupt as the evidence suggested. I was the reason they'd gotten away with it for so long. The report also contained Dominic's personal observations, notes he'd made after family dinners and holiday gatherings. Subject V appears uncomfortable during business discussions, often changes subject or leaves room. Subject V's relationship with mother is strained, formal. Subject V shows genuine affection for sister C but seems unaware of C's involvement in operations. There were pages of these notes, a clinical record of my family dynamics as observed by someone who'd been cataloging our dysfunction while pretending to be part of it. But there were other notes too, ones that seemed more personal. Subject V spoke about her students with genuine passion, clearly invested in their success beyond curriculum requirements. Subject V's artwork shows technical skill but also emotional vulnerability, suggests she uses art as outlet for processing complex feelings. Subject V mentioned feeling like outsider in family, expressed relief at having moved away after college. These observations felt different, more human, like Dominic had been seeing me as a person even while documenting my family's crimes. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I painted it instead. Another canvas, this one showing 2 figures standing back to back, one in light and one in shadow, connected but separate. I didn't title it. I just let it exist as a question I couldn't answer yet. The trial began on a Monday morning in late summer. The courthouse was a federal building downtown, all marble and security checkpoints and reporters lined up outside with cameras. Natalie walked me through a side entrance to avoid the media, and we made our way to a witness waiting room where I sat for 3 hours before being called. When I finally entered the courtroom, I was struck by how ordinary it looked. I'd expected something dramatic, something that matched the magnitude of what was happening, but it was just a room with wooden benches and fluorescent lights and a judge's bench that needed refinishing. My family sat at the defense table with their attorneys, all of them in conservative suits that made them look like strangers. My mother's hair was different, shorter and darker. My father had lost weight. Trevor looked smaller somehow, diminished. Claudia was the only one who made eye contact with me, and what I saw in her face was pleading, desperate hope that I might somehow save her. I looked away. Dominic sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, wearing the same navy suit from our wedding. When our eyes met, he gave me the smallest nod, just an acknowledgement that I was here, that I was doing this. I nodded back and took my seat in the witness box. The prosecutor, a woman named Caroline Wright who'd introduced herself briefly in the hallway, approached with a kind smile. She asked me to state my name for the record, to confirm my relationship to the defendants. Then she began walking me through my story, question by careful question, building a picture of who I was and what I hadn't known. Ms. Brennan, were you ever involved in the financial operations of Brennan Holdings? No, I answered. My voice was steady. I was a teacher. I didn't know anything about my father's business beyond what he told me at family dinners, which was very little. Were you aware that your name appeared on multiple business documents and financial accounts? Not until Agent Ashford showed me after the arrests, I said. I never signed those documents. I never authorized my name to be used that way. How did you feel when you learned your family had forged your signature? I felt betrayed, I said simply. I felt like I'd been used my entire life without knowing it. The questioning continued for over an hour. Caroline walked me through my childhood, my relationship with my parents, the way I'd been kept separate from business discussions. She asked about specific family events that Dominic had attended, whether I'd noticed him asking questions or showing unusual interest in my father's work. I answered honestly. I hadn't noticed. I'd been too happy that my family finally seemed to accept the man I loved to see that he was documenting everything. When Caroline finished, the defense attorney stood up. He was an older man with silver hair and an expensive suit, the kind of lawyer my father would hire to project confidence and authority. He approached me with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Brennan, he began, his voice smooth, you testified that you knew nothing about your family's business operations. But isn't it true that you attended numerous business dinners and charitable events where Brennan Holdings was discussed? I attended events as my parents' daughter, I said. That doesn't mean I understood what was being discussed or that I had any role in their operations. But you benefited from your family's wealth, didn't you? The car you drove, the education you received, the comfortable life you led, all of that came from money generated by Brennan Holdings. I accepted gifts from my parents, yes, I said. But I didn't know that money was illegally obtained. If I had known, I would have refused it. Would you? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Or would you have simply looked the other way, enjoying the benefits while ignoring the source? Objection, Natalie called out from her seat in the gallery. Argumentative and calls for speculation. Sustained, the judge said. Counselor, stick to questions about facts the witness can confirm. The defense attorney pivoted, asking about my relationship with Dominic, implying I'd known about the investigation, suggesting I'd been complicit in the sting operation. I answered each question calmly, clearly, the way Natalie had taught me. No, I didn't know Dominic was FBI. No, I wasn't aware of the investigation. Yes, I was devastated when I learned the truth. Yes, I still loved him despite everything, though I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. That last answer slipped out before I could stop it, and I saw Dominic's head lift slightly in the gallery. But I didn't take it back. It was true, however complicated and painful that truth might be. After nearly 2 hours of testimony, the judge finally dismissed me. I stepped down from the witness box on shaking legs and walked out of the courtroom without looking at anyone. Natalie found me in the hallway, gave me a quick hug, told me I'd done beautifully. Agent Delgado appeared with water and a protein bar, her usual practical kindness. And Dominic waited at the end of the corridor, keeping his distance but making sure I saw him there. I walked past all of them and out into the bright afternoon, breathing in humid air that tasted like salt from the harbor. I'd told my story. I'd taken control of the narrative, just like Natalie said. But I didn't feel powerful. I just felt tired, hollowed out, like I'd given away pieces of myself to a room full of strangers and didn't know if I'd ever get them back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it instead. "You were brave in there," the message read. "Braver than I ever was. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me, even if you can never forgive them." It was signed with a single initial, C. Claudia. Still reaching out from jail, still hoping for absolution I wasn't ready to give. I typed a response and then deleted it. Typed another and deleted that too. Finally, I just turned off my phone and walked toward the harbor, toward the water and the boats and the horizon that promised nothing except space to breathe. The trial lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of sitting in courtrooms and hallways, of watching prosecutors dismantle my family's empire piece by piece, of listening to witnesses describe schemes I'd never imagined while eating lunch from my parents' kitchen table. 6 weeks of avoiding eye contact with my mother, of watching my father age a decade, of seeing Claudia cry silently into tissues her attorney kept handing her. Dominic testified on the 3rd week. I wasn't required to be there, but I went anyway, sitting in the back row where I could see without being seen. He took the stand in a charcoal suit, his posture military straight, his voice steady and professional as he described the 18-month investigation. He walked the jury through surveillance photos, wire transfer records, recorded conversations. He explained how he'd been assigned to get close to the family through me, how he documented their operations while maintaining his cover. The defense attorney tried to rattle him during cross-examination, suggesting he'd entrapped my family, that he'd manufactured evidence, that his relationship with me had compromised his objectivity. Dominic never flinched. He answered each question with the same calm precision, never defensive, never apologetic. He was good at his job. That was the hardest part to watch. He was exceptionally good at lying, at becoming someone else, at making people trust him while cataloging their destruction. But when the prosecutor asked him directly whether his feelings for me had been part of the operation, something shifted in his expression. "No," he said clearly. "My relationship with Valentina Brennan was not part of my assignment. It was a complication I reported to my superiors and one that did not interfere with my ability to gather evidence and execute the investigation." "Did you love her?" the prosecutor asked, and the courtroom went silent. "Objection," the defense attorney called. "Relevance." "I'll allow it," the judge said. "The witness may answer." Dominic looked straight ahead, not at me, not at my family, just at some point in the middle distance. "Yes," he said. "I did. I do." The prosecutor nodded and moved on to technical questions about evidence chains and warrant procedures, but I couldn't hear anything else. I sat in that back row feeling like I'd been cracked open, all my careful compartments spilling into each other. He'd said it under oath, in front of a jury, in front of everyone. He loved me. Present tense. Not past, not conditional, not qualified. He loved me still, even now, even after everything. I left before he finished testifying. I couldn't watch anymore. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon in early October. The jury had deliberated for 3 days, and the tension in the courthouse was thick enough to choke on. I sat with Natalie in the gallery, Agent Delgado on my other side, while reporters filled every available seat behind us. Dominic was there too, sitting with the prosecution team, his face unreadable. When my family was led in, I studied them the way you study strangers. My mother wore a cream blouse and pearls, still trying to project respectability even now. My father's suit hung loose on his frame, his face gray and deeply lined. Trevor looked furious, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. And Claudia looked broken, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she sat down. The jury filed in, 12 people who'd spent weeks listening to the details of my family's crimes, and not one of them looked at the defense table. That's when I knew. The judge asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood, a middle-aged woman with glasses and a purple cardigan, and began reading. Guilty. 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 The word repeated like a drumbeat, once for each count, each charge, each crime. Wire fraud, guilty. Conspiracy, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Tax evasion, guilty. My father faced additional guilty verdicts for bribery and falsification of records. My mother made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. My father closed his eyes. Trevor's attorney put a hand on his shoulder, and Claudia covered her face with both hands. The judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing hearing for 6 weeks out. Then it was over. People stood, began filing out, reporters rushing to get statements. I sat frozen in my seat while the courtroom emptied around me. Natalie squeezed my hand. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I watched them being led out through a side door, my parents and siblings in their nice clothes and handcuffs, heading back to detention until sentencing. They didn't look at me. Not once during the entire verdict had any of them turned around to see me sitting there. Agent Delgado touched my shoulder. There's going to be a press conference in 10 minutes, she said. Caroline wants to make a statement. You don't have to be there, but if you want to say something, this would be your chance. I shook my head. I don't have anything to say to reporters. Then let's get you out of here, she said. We left through a back stairwell, avoiding the media circus assembling in the main lobby. Agent Delgado drove me back to my apartment, made sure I got inside safely, told me to call if I needed anything. Then I was alone in my converted warehouse with its exposed brick and big windows, surrounded by paintings I'd made of grief and betrayal and questions I still couldn't answer. I stood in the center of my living room for a long time, just breathing. They were guilty. Officially, legally, unambiguously guilty. My family had committed federal crimes, had stolen money, had ruined lives, and now they would face consequences. Justice had been served exactly the way it was supposed to be served. So why did I feel so empty? My phone rang. Dominic's name appeared on the screen, and before I could think better of it, I answered. Val, he said, and his voice was gentler than I'd heard it in weeks. I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said automatically. Then, because that was a lie, I added, I don't know. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. There's no supposed to, he said. Whatever you're feeling is valid. I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Did you know? I asked. Did you know from the beginning that it would end this way? I knew the evidence was strong, he said. I knew they were guilty. But you never know how a jury will decide, what arguments will land, what reasonable doubt might look like to 12 strangers. So no, I didn't know for certain. But I hoped. Because it's justice, I said. Because it's the truth, he corrected. And because it means you're free, Val. Your name is clear. The forged documents can't hurt you anymore. You can rebuild your life without looking over your shoulder. Free, I repeated. The word felt strange in my mouth. I'm unemployed, estranged from my entire family, and in love with a man who lied to me for 2 years. That's not what freedom feels like. There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, You're still in love with me? I shouldn't have said that, I muttered. But you did, he said. And Val, I meant what I said on the stand. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I broke your trust in ways that might be irreparable, but if there's any possibility that we could find our way back to each other, I want to try. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said. I don't know if I can trust anyone. I understand, he said. And I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm just asking you not to close the door completely. Take whatever time you need. Process everything. Figure out who you are without your family's shadow hanging over you. And if, somewhere down the line, you think we might have a chance, I'll be here. What if I decide we don't? I asked. What if I decide the damage is too deep? Then I'll accept that, he said. I'll respect your decision and I'll leave you alone. But Val, I have to believe that love can survive complicated circumstances. I have to believe that what we had was real enough to weather this. Otherwise, I spent 2 years falling for someone I'll never get to actually be with, and that's a tragedy I'm not ready to accept yet. I closed my eyes, feeling tears slide down my cheeks. I have to go, I said. Okay, he said. But Val, one more thing. I'm proud of you. The way you testified, the way you've handled all of this, the strength it took to sit in that courtroom and watch your family face consequences. You're remarkable. I hope you know that. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret, something like I miss you or I wish things were different or maybe we can try. I wasn't ready for any of those words yet. Sentencing happened 6 weeks later, the week before Thanksgiving. I didn't attend. Natalie went on my behalf and called me afterward with the results. My father received 12 years in federal prison. My mother got 8. Trevor got 6. And Claudia, who'd cooperated extensively with prosecutors after her conviction, received 4 years with possibility of parole after 2. 12 years. I tried to imagine my father in prison for 12 years, tried to picture him in an orange jumpsuit eating cafeteria food and following someone else's rules. I couldn't do it. The man I'd known, the one who'd worn tailored suits and commanded rooms and rewritten his own history, that man was gone. The person going to prison was someone else entirely. The news coverage was extensive but brief. The Brennan family fraud case became a cautionary tale, a talking point about white-collar crime and regulatory oversight. A few think pieces were written about me, about what it meant to be the innocent family member, about whether I'd really known nothing or had simply been skilled at looking away. I didn't read any of them. I didn't need strangers debating my guilt or innocence. I'd lived through it. That was enough. Winter arrived cold and gray. Charleston wasn't supposed to get this cold, but that year it did, frost forming on windows and wind cutting through jackets. I spent most of December in my apartment painting, applying for teaching positions in other cities, trying to imagine a life somewhere else where no one knew my name or my story. Agent Delgado checked in regularly, always with practical help. She connected me with a therapist who specialized in trauma and family estrangement. She helped me change my name legally, not my whole name but enough that a casual Google search wouldn't immediately connect me to the trial. I became Valentina Morse, using my grandmother's maiden name, and it felt like putting on someone else's clothes, strange and uncomfortable but necessary. On Christmas Eve, I received a package at my door. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Dominic's. I almost didn't open it. I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for an hour before finally cutting the tape. Inside was a small velvet box and an envelope. I opened the envelope first. The note was handwritten on plain paper, his script neat and precise. Val, it read. I'm not trying to pressure you or manipulate you. I just wanted you to have this because it belongs to you, regardless of what happens between us. It was real when I bought it, and it's still real now. The rest is up to you. Merry Christmas. I opened the velvet box. Inside was the engagement ring, the 4-carat diamond I'd worn for exactly 3 minutes before my life imploded. I'd forgotten about it, forgotten that I'd given it back to Agent Delgado that first night at the federal building. He'd kept it all this time. I slipped it on my finger, just to feel the weight of it, and I stood in my kitchen crying for everything that ring represented. The future we'd planned. The lies underneath those plans. The love that had somehow survived the lies. The impossibility of knowing which parts were real and which parts were performance. I took the ring off and put it back in the box. Then I did something impulsive, something I'd been thinking about for weeks but hadn't had the courage to act on. I grabbed my phone and texted Dominic. Are you working tomorrow? His response came 2 minutes later. No. I'm off until the 27th. Why? Because I think we need to talk, I wrote. Actually talk, not through attorneys or in courtrooms or on the phone. Face to face. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his message came through. Name the place and time. I'll be there. My apartment. Tomorrow at 2. And Dominic, bring your honesty. Nothing else. I've never offered you anything else, he wrote back. Not when it mattered. I didn't respond. I just set my phone down and looked at the ring box sitting on my counter, at the paintings covering my walls, at the life I'd built from the wreckage of the old one. Tomorrow I would face the man who'd saved me by destroying me. Tomorrow I would decide if love could survive the kind of betrayal that came wrapped in good intentions. But tonight, I just sat in my apartment and watched snow fall over Charleston, rare and strange and beautiful, covering everything in white. Christmas Day arrived clear and bright, the snow already melting under a winter sun. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment obsessively, rearranging furniture, rehanging paintings, doing anything to avoid thinking about what I was going to say when Dominic arrived. At 1:30, I gave up on productivity and just sat on the couch, staring at the door, waiting. He knocked at exactly 2 o'clock. I'd forgotten how punctual he was, how he treated time like a sacred contract. I opened the door and there he stood, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, holding nothing but his car keys. He looked different outside of his suits, younger somehow, more like the man I'd fallen in love with and less like Agent Ashford of the FBI. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. Then, because I didn't know what else to do, I stepped aside and let him in. He entered slowly, looking around at the apartment he'd never seen, taking in the exposed brick and high ceilings and walls covered with my grief paintings. He stopped in front of the one showing the empty wedding dress surrounded by shadows. "These are extraordinary," he said quietly. "Dark, but extraordinary." "They're honest," I said. "That's all I know how to be anymore." He turned to face me. "I understand that," he said. "And Val, I want to be completely honest with you now. No more secrets, no more missions. Just me, telling you everything you want to know." I sat down on the couch and gestured for him to sit in the chair across from me. "Not next to me, not yet. We needed space between us for this conversation." "Tell me about the wire," I said. "When did you start wearing one around me?" His expression tightened. "Never," he said. "I never wore a wire when I was alone with you." That was one line I refused to cross. My supervisors wanted me to, argued that intimate conversations might reveal useful information, but I told them I wouldn't do it. Our private moments were private. I recorded family dinners and public events, but never our home, never our bed. Something loosened in my chest. "Thank you," I said quietly. Then, harder, "Tell me about the proposal. Was any of that real?" "All of it," he said without hesitation. "I bought the ring with my own money, money I'd saved from my salary. I planned the sailboat evening because I knew you loved the harbor at sunset. I wrote my own words, meant every promise I made. The proposal wasn't part of the investigation. It was me, loving you, wanting a future with you even though I knew it might be impossible." "But you knew we might never actually get married," I said. "I hoped we would," he said. "I hoped the investigation would wrap up, that I could tell you the truth and you'd understand why I'd done it. I was naive. I thought love could overcome anything, even this. I was wrong about the timing, but I wasn't wrong about loving you." I looked at him sitting in my chair, this man who'd lied with such precision and now claimed to be telling me nothing but truth. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Any of it?" "I regret hurting you," he said. "I regret that your wedding became a crime scene. I regret every moment you spent doubting whether anything between us was real. But do I regret the investigation? No. Your family was destroying lives, Val. They needed to be stopped. And I was in a position to stop them. I'd make the same choice again, even knowing the cost. Even if the cost was us, I said. Even then, he said. Because some things matter more than my happiness. Justice matters. Truth matters. And keeping you out of prison, keeping you safe from your father's schemes, that mattered most of all. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below where people were walking off Christmas dinners, where life continued normally for everyone who wasn't me. You keep saying you saved me, I said. But Dominic, you also broke me. You shattered my ability to trust, to believe in anyone's sincerity. How am I supposed to rebuild that? I don't know, he said honestly, and I heard him stand, heard him move closer but not touching. I don't have an answer that makes this better. All I can tell you is that I see what I've done to you, I understand the damage, and I'm willing to spend however long it takes to prove that some things really were true. That my love for you was never a lie, never a strategy, never anything but completely real. I turned to face him. We were standing 3 feet apart, close enough to touch but still separate. Prove it, I said. If you mean all of this, if you really want a chance to rebuild what we had, prove it. Not with words or grand gestures. With time. With patience. With showing up consistently and honestly until maybe, possibly, I can learn to trust you again. He nodded slowly. I can do that, he said. Whatever you need, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere. I'm moving, I said abruptly. Probably to Atlanta or maybe Charlotte. I need to start over somewhere that isn't filled with memories of all of this. His face fell for just a second before he composed it. I understand, he said. And I won't follow you unless you ask me to. But Val, even if you're in another city, even if we're not together, I'm still here. If you need anything, if you just want to talk, I'm here. I know, I said. And that's what I need you to understand. I'm not saying no forever. I'm saying not yet. I'm saying I need time to figure out who I am without my family, without the trial, without all of this chaos. And then, maybe, we can see if there's anything left to build on. That's more than I deserve, he said quietly. Probably, I agreed. But Dominic, I meant what I said in court. I do still love you. I hate that I do, it would be so much easier if I didn't, but I can't seem to stop. So I'm not closing the door. I'm just asking you to wait on the other side of it until I'm ready to open it again. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes for the first time since he'd walked in. I can wait, he said. I'm very patient when it matters. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned back one more time. The ring, he said. I meant what I wrote. It's yours regardless. If you want to keep it, throw it away, sell it, whatever feels right. But it was bought with real money and real intentions, and I wanted you to have it. I'll keep it, I said. I don't know what that means yet, but I'll keep it. He nodded, and then he was gone, walking down the stairs and out into the cold December afternoon. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling lighter than I had in months. Not healed, not whole, but maybe beginning to understand what healing might look like. I went back to the velvet box on my counter, opened it one more time, and looked at the ring that had survived everything. Then I put it in my studio, on the shelf next to my paints and brushes, a reminder that some things endure even when the world around them falls apart. Outside, the last of the snow melted into puddles that reflected the sky. And somewhere in the city, Dominic drove back to his life while I began imagining mine. Separate for now, but not forever. Just not yet. I moved to Atlanta in February. A small apartment in Virginia Highland with hardwood floors and a balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. I found work at a private academy teaching art to high schoolers who actually wanted to be there, who chose electives instead of enduring requirements. The principal knew about my background because I'd been honest in the interview, but she hired me anyway. Fresh starts require someone willing to offer them. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. Dogwoods blooming white and pink, the city softening under pollen and possibility. I painted less frantically now, working on pieces that felt quieter, more hopeful. A series about doorways, some opening, some closed, all bathed in different light. I didn't analyze what they meant. I just let them exist. Dominic and I texted occasionally. Nothing heavy, just small check-ins. He'd send photos of Charleston sunsets with no caption needed. I'd reply with pictures of my students' work, charcoal drawings and watercolor experiments. We were learning each other again in fragments, building something new from whatever pieces survived the fire. In April, he drove up for a weekend. We'd planned it carefully, no expectations beyond coffee and conversation. He stayed at a hotel downtown, and we met at Piedmont Park on a Saturday morning that smelled like cut grass and someone's distant barbecue. We walked for hours, talking about everything except the trial, except my family, except the wedding that never was. He told me about a case he was working on, something involving cryptocurrency fraud. I told him about my students, about the girl who painted only in shades of blue and the boy who sculpted tiny clay figures of his anxieties. At some point, our hands found each other. Not dramatic, not deliberate. Just his fingers brushing mine and then staying there, warm and familiar. We didn't talk about what it meant. We just walked holding hands like people who were figuring things out one careful step at a time. By summer, he was visiting twice a month. We went to museums and restaurants, took day trips to the mountains, learned how to be together without the weight of investigation or betrayal pressing down on every moment. He was patient in ways that surprised me, never pushing, never demanding more than I could give. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, I started trusting him again. Not blindly, not the way I had before, but consciously. Choosing to believe him because he'd earned it through consistency, through showing up, through being exactly who he said he was every single time. In August, I asked him to stay over. Not for anything specific, just to wake up next to each other again, to see if that intimacy could be rebuilt. He brought groceries and cooked breakfast the next morning, scrambled eggs and coffee, standing in my small kitchen like he belonged there. Maybe he did. Maybe we were finally building something real on a foundation that could hold it. My attorney called in September with news about Claudia. She was being released early, her cooperation and good behavior cutting her sentence down to 20 months served. Did I want to see her? Natalie asked gently. She's expressed interest in reconciling if you're open to it. I thought about it for 3 days before deciding. Yes, I told Natalie. But on my terms, in my city, when I'm ready. The meeting happened in October at a coffee shop I chose, neutral territory with escape routes. Claudia walked in looking smaller than I remembered, wearing jeans and a plain sweater, her hair pulled back simply. She ordered tea and sat across from me with careful distance. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, she started. I know what I did, what I didn't do. I just wanted to see you, to tell you that I'm sorry and that I understand if you never want to speak to me again. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about prison, about therapy, about confronting the ways she'd enabled our parents' destruction. She didn't make excuses. She didn't blame anyone but herself. And when she left, we didn't hug or make promises about rebuilding our relationship. We just acknowledged that we'd both survived something terrible, and maybe someday that shared survival could become something else. Dominic proposed again on a Tuesday in November. Nothing elaborate, no sailboat or grand gestures. We were in my apartment cooking dinner together, and he just stopped in the middle of chopping vegetables and said, "I want to marry you. For real this time. No investigations, no secrets. Just us choosing each other with full knowledge of who we actually are." I looked at him standing in my kitchen with a knife in one hand and hope in his eyes, and I said yes. Not because everything was perfect or healed or easy. But because we'd walked through fire and come out the other side still reaching for each other. Because love that survives the worst versions of ourselves might actually be strong enough to hold the best versions too. We got married in December, a small ceremony at the courthouse with Agent Delgado and Natalie as witnesses. I wore a simple dress, cream-colored and tea-length, nothing like the elaborate gown that had hung in a crime scene. Dominic wore a suit and the most genuine smile I'd ever seen on his face. The judge pronounced us married, and we kissed like people who'd earned every second of happiness we could grab. That night, in the apartment that had become our home, Dominic pulled out the original engagement ring. I'd never given it back to him, kept it in my studio as a talisman of things that endure. He slipped it on my finger alongside the simple gold band we'd bought that afternoon. "This was always meant to be yours," he said. "Through everything, it was always meant to end up here." I looked at the ring catching light, at the man who'd betrayed me to save me, who'd loved me through every version of the truth. And I realized something essential. We don't get to choose how our stories begin. We only get to choose how we write the endings. Mine started with a wedding that became a crime scene. But it didn't end there. It continued through trials and tears and slow rebuilding. Through choosing trust over fear, through learning that some loves are worth the risk of being hurt again. Through understanding that the strongest foundations are built not on perfection but on honest repair. I chose this ending. The one where I stand in my home with paint under my nails and love in my chest and a future that belongs entirely to me. Where the family I built matters more than the one I lost. Where the truth, however painful, set me free to become exactly who I was always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.